Welcome everyone to the ULP. Welcome to all the people that are here. You've braved the cold. I'm told this is the coldest day in winter. And so thank you very much for coming. And those online, thank you very much. Apology, we started a little bit late because the traffic was quite difficult. So that is why we started a little bit late. So welcome again. Why don't you clap hands for yourself that you are here. It is a really wonderful time to be a part of ULP, and we are again meeting. Let me first acknowledge Confidence. Confidence is our leader who's leading this massive program that we have here, which is called Unleashing Leadership Potential Authors Forum. And I always say this, so I'm sure the tapes are always full of this. Until we can write our stories, somebody else is going to write our stories, particularly here in Africa. So we make sure that we have, that's the main reason. And I'm so glad for all of these young people that are here. You've been part of Young Leaders program, and Confidence has been with you. Today, I also like to introduce you to a man I know very well. We grew up together. We're all young people. And I was saying to him many years ago, don't think we've ever not been young people. We've also been young people. And, that's right. And I was saying to him, you know, there's a time when they were in their 30s and they hit the South African market big time. And then all of a sudden they disappeared, and he disappeared, and for a long time, and I didn't know. Now he's reappeared again with a powerful message, which I'm glad you'll all benefit from. Let me introduce you. His name is Abner Mariri. He's an entrepreneur. He's a social activist. He's a mentor. He's an inspirational speaker, an author, and his life journey from a township boy to the streets of Los Angeles, wow, you see, and back to South Africa at the most exciting time in its history, shows his indomitable spirit. But this is not your ordinary memoirs of township. He went into a very deep journey that was very, very, very difficult. And he's going to tell it. And now he's come out of it. And he's written this book called The Door, An Addict's Journey. And I want you to listen very carefully. We specifically today invited young people so that you can listen to the story. It's better to prevent than to cure. So listen very carefully and making sure that you take your notes. Tell the story to other friends as soon as and then get yourself this book and buy it. Because you see, when you invest in something, you'll treasure it. If you don't have money, collect it and make sure that you get it from somebody and ask anybody to help you. But it's very important that you buy this book and read it and share it at school. Make sure that your friends knows about it. And I'd like to hand over now to Confidence. Let's clap hands for Abner.
We've been taught that where there is no vision, the people perish. But I believe it's equally true that where there is no visionary, there is no vision. So we'd like to just honor the visionary of the house, Prof. Maurice Radebe. Can we give him a round of applause, please? Ntate Mariri. I'm going to refer to you as Ntate Mariri tonight. You've been welcomed by the Prof, but allow me to also extend a warm welcome to you, Ntate.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. When we talk about a door, you know, we use it a lot of times as a metaphor for opportunity.
That's right.
You know, we say, so-and-so opened a door for me and my life was never the same. When I read your book, I began to understand that there are different doors.
That's right.
Not every door is a door to opportunity.
No.
Right at the very start, can you tell us about that door that you opened that fateful day?
The wrong door.
The wrong door.
Yes. I'd be failing in my duty when I start if I don't express a word of gratitude to Prof. Maurice Radebe. His reputation precedes him, and certainly a man of the hour. And I've been following ULP. I've been in this house many times to witness and to see just the power that lies here. And like you said earlier on, the vision, the visionary, that the capacity to just make things happen.
Yes, sir.
You know, is profound. And I think for me, from my side, it needs commendation, and I stand in awe to see what God has done in his life. And he is a source of inspiration for many. And thank you to the audience that's here. The Wrong Door, my goodness. The Wrong Door effectively chronicles a turning point in my life where I did something that I should not have done. And effectively, the wrong door, you know, if I may put a context, there's a scriptural passage that says pride goes before the fall. Yeah. And for me, I should not have been where I was, except that I made choices that led me to come to a wrong door. And the trajectory of my life was not leading me there. It was the disobedience and the tendency to want to do things my own way that led me to the wrong door. And that wrong door, effectively, I'd gone to speak somewhere because I wore a couple of hats, and one of the hats was an inspirational speaker. I love to talk to people. And when I came back from the US, I had an agent who marketed my services, went across the country. So that wrong door, I had gone to that place to go and speak during the day. And in the evening, obviously, they say, what do you drink? And I said, I drink wine. And there's a context to that. And it was a Tuesday. I'll never forget the day. And after downing what seemed like about 4 or 5 glasses of wine, I asked for a restroom. They said, go upstairs to the door on the left. Instead of going to the door on the left, I went to the door on the right. Mm-hmm. And it was not the right door.
Not the right door.
The wrong door. And I walked in that door, and there must have been about 8 or 9 people. My memory does not serve me well there, but there's quite a bunch of people. But 2 of them I knew very well. I was tipsy. And they pushed the door. One guy pushed the door and locked. And they started to debate and argue amongst themselves and said, who didn't lock the door? And I was baffled. And in that room, there were 3 young ladies who were half naked. And it truly was a wrong door. Mm. And the guy said, okay, Mariri, now that you've seen us, you got to try something before we let you go. Mm. And there was a small little table in the middle, and that table had practically everything, or at least the bulk of the drugs that were used there. And I saw something that looked like a cigarette, and it was a crack pipe. Okay? I said, oh, there's a cigarette. I don't like stuff that goes up my nose. So I said, I'm going to try that one. So I tried, lo and behold, I said, I'd like to try that one. They showed me how to do it. Effectively, it's a small little glass with some filter in front of it. So you burn crack, because crack comes in a form of rock, and it's like peanuts. You know, so you cut up small peanuts, and then you put them, they melt them there, and then you obviously have to heat it up, and then you slowly inhale. And that slow inhaling sends that smoke to your brain. And that's where the high is derived from. And it was in that room, through the wrong door, that I experienced that. And of course, there's women there, it was a party within a party. Yeah. So it didn't do anything to me. After 15 minutes, I said, okay, guys, I've done it. I'm going home. My wife and my family are waiting. I was saying this to myself. It's a Tuesday night. You have no excuse to be out late. As I was leaving, got in my car, driving out. As I was about to get on the freeway, the drugs started to kick in. it was like a new world was born to me. A new door was opened. And for me, being a spiritual person, it was a door to the demonic, in a sense. And I savored the moment, but the feeling that it gave me, it was an incredibly aesthetic feeling that beggars description and staggers the imagination. And I parked, savored the moment, and as quickly as the high came, it disappeared. But I was sold to the drug. And I made a U-turn. Instead of going home, I went back to the house.
Wow.
And I stayed there till 1 o'clock, 1:45 in the morning. And that's when all hell broke loose, because Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was born. A duplicitous character, nature was born. Telling lies, having to balance lies with the truth, having to be something during the day and something at night, having to it. And the first couple of weeks, I figured, hey, this is a casual thing I can do better than alcohol, or at least once you've down alcohol, you can accentuate the feeling of ecstasy with it. And I liked it, and I looked for places to go, people to see, who's using and stuff like that. And of course, in a clandestine manner. And I had to balance that with being a father, being a husband, being a church leader, and being a potential junkie. And I was slowly being sucked into that life.
Wow.
And I didn't realize that I was sucked in. And it was through that wrong door of asking, I so regret that I just should have gotten into my car, parked under the freeway. Kishaile 69 mole under the freeway. Dust.
Wow. So, obviously, before you enter that wrong door,
Yes. Yes.
there's a story behind, because by the time you had reached that particular door, there were many other doors that had opened for you. You had gone to America.
That's right.
You were a successful businessman.
That's right.
So can we backtrack a little bit
That's right.
and go to a young Abner? Tell us about a young Abner who dreamt of America.
I actually didn't dream of America. I actually dreamed of making my family better than I was.
Yes.
I was born in a very poor family. I'm not unique. Many of us come from that background. My mother worked as a domestic worker. I was literally brought up by my grandmother. And my father worked for a company called Van Leer, raising 7 children. And when he retired after 42 years, they actually gave him a fake gold watch as a token of appreciation. But again, I'm not unique in that situation. There's many of us who come from that environment. So there was no electricity when I was growing up, so it was all malahla and coal. But it was my grandmother, uneducated, who pushed me to go to school. And I always wanted to do better things. Now, being Re7 Kohai, I'm the last born. And it was my mother who took me to the kitchens, Kodi kitchening, to the kitchens, Kodi kitchening.
Yeah.
And when Bas Jack, her boss, and Mrs. Jack were away, I would sneak into the house, and I couldn't believe the opulence. So I didn't envy it, but I wanted it for myself, and I also wanted my mother to come out of that life. And I said to my mother one day, the day I work is the day you stop working here and go into retirement. Because I don't know her as a mother. She was always going to kitchen in Hussein. Saturday was sebeta, wetsa di washene. So we don't get to really enjoy our mother or our parents, as it were. It was my grandmother who I enjoyed. So I dreamed of becoming something and something better. And I knew instinctively and intrinsically that given an opportunity, I will become that. And by the grace of God, God started to open doors. Funny enough, I used to go to the airport after church, because we grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church, NG Kerk of Africa, my parents were. I didn't understand the dynamic as well, because it was the oppressor's church. But that's a subject for another day. So I would go to the airports literally every single Sunday after church, and I will watch planes come in and planes go out. And for me, a vision of becoming something better. And ke tla tloga ko airport, go back to the township of Kwatema, and ga o kena ka Tema, all you see is nothing but smoke, because the door for the kodimo, batho ba besitse, and you could actually see a cloud. And I navigated through that, and a thought struck me to say, perhaps this dream can become a reality. There was a church in Kwatema called the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's still there. And they used to bring African Americans. And I admired them. You know, I liked them. The level of confidence they exuded, the way in which they carried themselves, the extent to which they were articulate with the Queen's language. I said, yeah. And they are black like me.
Yeah.
So I said, I want this path. So I began to make inroads. Eventually, by the grace of God, I actually went to every single businessman in the township and asked if they can contribute to my dream. And I would ask for X amount here, X amount there, X amount there, and collected that money. By the way, I never left the country as a political activist. You know, that will be a misconception. I left the country as a person who was hungry for a better life. I was tired of the township. I was tired of the misery that I saw my parents working hard, but still could not make the ends meet. Yeah. And I said, there has to be a better life out there. And by the grace of God, when you search for something, eventually you will find it.
Amen.
And I searched. So it was that young Abner who was, America happened to be, by the way, as a place that I could go to. And I got the opportunity to get in the plane. You know, I always say that sometimes people who don't see themselves going somewhere naturally cannot see you going anywhere. Yeah. So you have to be careful who you share your dreams and your goals and your aspirations with. Yeah. Because people who have no sense of future, you know, I remember my father rode a bicycle to Van Leer every day, Monday to Friday, to work, to save money, okay? And a group of us as friends, when I told them with my intentions, I said, you know, machitang funu kufana ne negro, excuse the French because it's not a politically correct term, but at the time that's how we used it. Professor Morris will know that that's how we used it. And I want to go to a place called America. And they were the first ones to discourage me because they don't see, but that is cool. Too much. It's not going to happen. Yeah. And they gave me practical example. They say, Uge wa Durban. Need to know, I've not been to Durban. No, my father has never been to Durban. Maybe I'm dreaming too big. I need to bring this dream. Yeah. You know, Kaspedi, bari yashika le garago, leona itlagar. Yeah. In other words, birds of the same feather flock together. Amen. So I decided to have friends who shared the same passion in terms of where we can go and what we can achieve, and we leverage on each other's strength. We encouraged each other. Yeah. We pushed each other. We put our money into one basket to say, let's do something to go far away. I was not a person who was into clothes, so I didn't care. I didn't care about girls. I didn't care about clothes. I just cared about those Negroes, excuse the term. And most of them a lot of them are my friends, and I wanted to get out. And it was amazing that when I put the money together and I was leaving the country, that same airport that I used to visualize, now I was physically and practically going to the airport. Yeah. They were the first ones to say, Samba now, Siaka. You know?
The same detractors.
The same detractors. And when I got to the airport, funny, I sat on the chair that I used to sit every Sunday. What was a vision now became a reality. So every time I go through pain and through struggle, I think about those days. Now and then, the airport has transformed and transitioned extensively. Montlahlahla, who contributed to that, sat with her at the house the other day, and I said, you know, the vision that you brought. But every time I feel down, I go to the airport. There's a hotel there. I just order coffee and let my coffee sit there, and I'd sit for 2 hours and reminisce that the same God that brought me out in that situation when I could not believe that I can leave the country, that same God, the scripture says, he's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So if he's done it yesterday, he can do it again.
Amen. Amen.
You know, so
you land in America.
yes.
$150, I believe, to your name.
Yeah, to my name. That's it.
You're brave.
Some of the things that I've done, it's absolutely phenomenal. $150.
$150.
US dollars. At the time, it was multiplied by 2.5 or 2.8.
Yeah.
Professor Morris will know.
So about 300 rand.
Yes, yes, about 300, yeah, maybe slightly more.
So you were literally just carrying your dreams with you.
That's all.
What did you do when you landed in America?
When I landed in America, one of the things that I said, because you have to apply for visa, okay? And under apartheid, you basically, I discovered not long ago, because I developed a passion in writing, by the way, an extreme passion in writing. And I land in the US, and when I land in the US, I have nothing, $150. But when I applied for a visa, I told people that I'm going to study to become a minister of the gospel. So apartheid, because it was a very Christian doctrine based, so they were sympathetic that this one will become one of us. So they gave me a stamp.
Yes, sir.
And I left.
Yeah.
I was very close to my brother, and I wanted to bring him. And when I left, I discovered that my parents were extensively harassed. They're just Christian people, domestic worker, as you would call them today. I have tremendous respect. I don't call them that. For me, they are part of the family. And because my mother comes from that life, and I understand what it takes to have a domestic worker in the house, as we call them. So they were harassed. Mama Isela, who was the apartheid executioner, it came in the TRC, was constantly at my place looking for my address. So when I called home, at the time, there was not a cell phone. Phone, connect and things like that. And it was very difficult in trying times. So I land there. I go to a place called Oakwood College, which is a Seventh-day Adventist church. Remember, they came to Seventh-day Adventist. So I made contacts. Now I go to Huntsville, Alabama, which is in the South. And the level of racism there, which was subtle because it was the United States of America. But the South was known for its racist tendencies and policies and for the slavery. So I land there. I don't like the place. I just didn't like the place. When I landed in LA, and in LA stayed for a couple of weeks, met a gentleman who had left with an organization called AZAPO, Azanian People's Organization. He had gotten a scholarship to run, and he ended up in the US. And he was at UCLA, studied there, eventually was working at UCLA. And because he was from Guatemala, at least there was camaraderie, I thought. So I stayed with him but he was a revolutionary. He thought I was a spy sent by apartheid. How did you get here? Did you? Have you been to Botswana? I've never been to Botswana. Have you been to Tanzania? I've never been to Tanzania. Even my political knowledge is slightly challenged, But I landed there and I stayed and I went to Huntsville, Alabama. I didn't like it. I came back to LA. And when I came back to LA, I couldn't find him. I landed at a place called Westwood. And when I was there during that time, I knew that there was a place called UCLA, University of California at Los Angeles. So there was a place at the corner of Westwood called Floshem Shoe Store. Diagonally was the UCLA police, and it was the campus. And I didn't have nothing. And I asked the black, African-American guy, please, engaged with him, told him I'm from South Africa, asked him to take my luggage. He took my luggage, put it in the storage, and I just went around hustling. And I was young, man. I was barely 20. And I said to myself, as spiritual as I was, even slightly naive, I prayed to God. I said, you got to intervene, And a car stopped literally in front of me, and there was a lady who said, young man, and it was Mrs. Butler. Yeah. And Mrs. Butler engaged me, put me in a car, and she basically gave me accommodation.
Oh.
And that's right. I talk about the providential hand of God. That when God says in Jeremiah, I know the plans I have for you, to prosper you and not to harm you, in the true sense of the word, it is a correct verse. No cliches. He knows the plans that he has for you. So when you step out in faith, God meets you halfway. And I believe in stepping out in faith, he could not leave me in a lurch. He provided, certain individuals. And Mrs. Butler, and that's the first time, truth be told, I experienced somebody who's using drugs. Because he had a son there. I was young. I never understood. He would lock himself in a room for hours on end and never understood why. And I was South African staying there, begging for the house. It was Mrs. Butler who taught me how to drive.
Oh.
And he had 5 kids. And every day I'd wake up in the wee hours of the morning, clean her house, because that for me was saying thank you for the accommodation, and clean her house. And after cleaning her house, the guys will still be asleep, wash dishes. I didn't care. It was a temporary station. So I'm not here to compare myself with the children. This is their home. And I'm an adept, so I needed to do an extra mile and to demonstrate appreciation for what was being done for me. So what I did for Miss Butler, it was amazing. She was a property woman, by the way, who was uneducated, okay? And what she did, she would buy a house, she would look for houses, buy a house. She introduced me to the likes of Jerry Savelle, Copeland Ministries, not personally, but I would go to their conferences. Jerry Savelle, Kenneth Copeland, quite a whole host of other preachers there, and she would introduce me to them. But it was in that house that I discovered and learned about drugs and drug addiction, at least when I recall it, because my clothes would disappear. And I wouldn't ask because I was a visitor, so I would keep quiet. My sisters would send me, put money together, send me some stuff, and it would disappear. But it was well, until I found a job selling the LA Times, the Los Angeles Times. And I used to knock on people's doors to open. During this time, they give you a section and say, you take this section in Midrand, we drop you off at 5 o'clock, we'll pick you up at 9 o'clock. And that's exactly what I did, sold the paper. Until I met another guy, Stuart Wood. It was raining that day. I had no say whatsoever. And I didn't know how I was going to make ends meet. On one end, I was going to school at Los Angeles City College, and I'd enrolled at the school, and I couldn't pay my fees. I got kicked out before I wrote exams. They said, no, you have not paid your school fees. You have to leave. I said, okay, I'll leave. But I went to my professors and asked if each one of them can give me a commendation, almost like a result of how I did for the last 6 months. And I took all that and I sent it to about, I don't know how many places I applied, and they all came back with regret. And that day, I was so depressed. Funny enough, suicide was not on my mind. Mental health was not there. I was driven by a goal, a dream to make my mother happy, to make my father better, to make sure my mother can stop working kodi kitchening at Ludlokochai. So eventually, I met Stuart Wood, who opened his house, said, no, I'm not going to buy your newspaper, but I can give you pizza. come in, white guy. And I came in, gave me pizza, and my life with Mrs. Butler was becoming ungovernable in that home. And it was that time Stuart says, look, I've got a room, I'm single, you can come and stay here. And I stayed with Stuart, his brother Terry, and his mom, and his sister. They literally adopted me, bought me a car. You know, it was like a family made just specially for me, from heaven, to fill in a space that I could not fill. You know, and eventually, by the grace of God, I got a scholarship from the United Nations, and that same school that I slept on the bus bench, looking at it with the stars, because LA is quite hot, and I looked at that school, and I got a scholarship from the United Nations, and I graduated from that institution with economics and political science degree.
Oh. Now, coming back to South Africa, you were a different Abner.
Yes.
You were armed intellectually,
yes,
armed spiritually, and it was, I believe, at the birth of the new South Africa.
New democracy, yes.
Opportunities were rife.
No, opportunities were rife.
What happened then?
Opportunities were so rife. You know, I came back home, last born, 4 sisters, 2 brothers, last born. All of them never gone to school. They'd gone up to JC at the time. Professor Morris will know. They'd gone up to JC at the time. And when I came back, it was my firstborn sister, Auslala, who said, we're going to throw a party for you. So they threw a party for me, and you know, and in the process, guess what happened? During the party, she said she's going back to school.
Wow.
I've inspired the family to go back to school, wow, and she's going to start. When she retired with a master's in education. Wow. So the ripple effect of that, ripple effect, then his son, Opa, went to Medunsa, got a BSc degree in chemistry, went to UCT, did honors, did masters, did an MBA. I told him to stop studying. You know? so now he's one of the engineers at AXA Airport.
Wow,
you know?
Amazing.
So
amazing.
then my cousin, Dumisani, also is an engineer at Ford Motor Company. So when you come to our family, you know, education, Raumaka Lausak in school. Ramakano, right?
And then,
from what planet do you come from?
Yeah.
Okay? So that was driven. And I had to pay the price by the grace of God to break that cycle. Yeah. And there's some of us in this room who have to pay the price to break a cycle. Yeah. It could be that in your family there were no millionaires. You could be that first person who becomes the first millionaire to break the cycle. But it's not going to come easy. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. You know, while in the US, I worked in the entertainment industry to make ends meet. You know, to go to school, to balance. I had rent to pay because eventually I had to stay on my own. You know, I had to knock on doors, and knocking on doors opened doors. I met all kinds of people. You know, Debbie Allen. I met Kaifa Semenya, the late Hugh Masekela I met. You know, Lebo M. Actually, Lebo M, who's a good friend, he's read my book, and he's enamored about my book. He says, Chief, we've got to take this book internationally because he's also putting out a book. But Lebo M was suicidal in the US. He I don't know how many times he almost committed suicide. And he had an assumed name. He lived in South Central Los Angeles, you know, and he was so poor at one stage that he was offered to be a drug dealer, to be a drug pusher. And he sat with cocaine in his pocket to say, of $200,000 US. Wow. And his miseries could go. But thank God that he said no. He opted for alcohol, became alcoholic, and he had to check himself into a rehab. And he was my friend. He's still my friend. And we worked together. And he came to my book launch, an amazing individual. And he's putting his book out. And by the grace of God, hopefully, I will recommend that he comes here to also share his story about his book.
Definitely.
Because he has done it. So while I was there, I hustled and I come back and, and now I've landed at home. I'm driven by, I've got an education, and having an education, I start to work, getting paid on the 25th, X amount, I figured, no, man, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to try it out. So I went back to the same township that I came from. I stayed with my parents. And I remembered that in LA, they used to have fashion shows. So, and at the end of every fashion show, whoever is showcasing their wares, they don't want to take that stock back home or so they sell it very cheap. So that's how I used to buy clothes while in LA. I used to shop for bargains, like real bargains. And the koti where you get bargains. And one of the koti thing was this place. So when I came home, I went back to the place and said, no, man, I can take 2-3 guys with me. Briefcase soft goods, and then the tlori pies. And that's how I managed to buy my first car. Wow. 325. Confidence, you know what I did? I even dropped the suspension.
Wow.
And put double exhaust.
Yeah.
So when I rev it, when I met my wife in Tabiseng, she used to go to Medunsa Medical School, go Pretoria, and every time I'd go check her out, and I'd use this kusheshe, akikena ko campus, neki rev, so that if khunali pari, that's the extent to which I was in love with it,
So, as you were ascending,
yes,
you met some trauma.
Yes.
In the book, you talk about the son that you adopted, who was also your nephew.
Yes.
And you had sent him to school, but he met with calamity. Can you talk about him and then talk about your brother?
Okay, my brother, Johannes.
Yes, the one who passed away.
The one affectionately known, I call him Dibu. Pila kibuti buti. So when I came back, the first thing I did in the first 3 years of my stay was to try and bring him back. Now, because they thought that, I don't know why they thought politically. So when he went to apply for visa, but Kenya Stempe, he was denied visa. So I came back, I found him, he was working for Maxal. Okay? And when he was working for Maxal, I was dabbling in, I've got a book that I'm working on called Hard Lessons. Okay? Because I've been through business rescue, I don't know how many times, I've been through liquidation, I've sat in high court with partners, one side, this side, had to brief counsel, to fight cases. It's something I've never done before, okay? And I've got a book called Hard Lessons that is in my head, in my brain, that has to come out. I've got a number of books that have to come out. So 2 o'clock every day, I open my laptop, have my coffee, and I start typing, and it just flows, okay? So when I came back, I took my brother, started a business. That business grew by leaps and bounds, and I started to speak. I think it was Love Mombiki who was speaking somewhere, and I attended the meeting, and I was given 15 minutes to speak. And there was a lady there named Mariri, and she liked what I said. And she said, no, I want to book you. I said, what do you mean book me? She said, I want to be your agent. I said, okay. What does that mean? She says, no, I'll send you to different places to go and speak. To speak and get paid. Get paid.
For speaking.
For speaking. I must refine this craft.
Yeah.
So I started to refine the craft and started to look for unique opportunities of what I can speak about. Now, while in the US, I worked for an organization that was started by the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which was based in South Central LA, doing projects in the community. So when I came back, and I learned a lot there. I learned about W.E. Du Bois. I learned about Malcolm X, got the opportunity to meet Malcolm X's wife and children, and I even hosted Louis Farrakhan, brought him to campus, met Jesse Jackson, and while I was working there, these thoughts started to develop. And when I came home and I met this lady, I designed courses that I can then subsequently go and sell. So I spoke the length and breadth of this country. I traveled the continent of Africa through Mariri speaking.
Wow.
And as God was opening those doors, he was opening, the writing was on the wall of black economic empowerment. And I went to speak for ABSA, and there was a guy there who said, my husband is looking for somebody to talk to unions. And I said, okay, I can design a program. Long story short, this guy was running Avenge Manufacturing, now called Avenge Manufacturing. So he brought me into the equation and said, listen, man, on a concrete sleeper business, I want to bring you in and give you 50% of the shares. So I said, I don't have a dime to my name to do that. And we just clicked, an African guy. We just clicked. And he took me to a place called the R in the Northern Cape, showed me a facility, a big manufacturing facility, and said, this is a concrete sleeper business. You buy 50%. And he took me by hand to ABSA and raised the necessary millions to acquire 50% of that operation. But I hate being armchair investor, waiting for somebody to make money for me. I don't like that. I want to get my hands dirty. So I moved to the R to understand the value chain of what it takes to make a concrete sleeper. So 50%, when you ride on Gautrain, 50% of those concrete sleepers that the train is lying on, I manufactured them. Wow. So we then moved, so it grew. So I took my brother in, and as God was opening doors in that space, and from there we went into insulation material, melting rock and turn it into wool. Took my brother, and money was coming in, went into Germany, bought a company called Triofan. At the time it was called Triofan, converted it into FEMA films, BOPP film, basically plastic ya Coca-Cola, that they write on Coca-Cola. That plastic is called BOPP film, and that's the product that we manufacture. So I loved manufacturing. Karl Marx talks about we need to control the means of production.
Yep.
So for me, I love manufacturing. And that's the space that I flourished in. And the opportunities were galore. Wanted to supply ballast for Transnet. Ballast matlapa kenang mo sporo. It's called ballast. And we wanted to supply them. And it was incredible. So I drew my brother in and had a company, a bus company. I ran 21 buses. When my mentor, the late Reverend Musupi, died, he was in KZN, and I was speaking in Cape Town, and he normally went through my speech, So I agreed with him to go through my speech, and unfortunately that day, he didn't answer my call at night on a Friday, and I'm speaking Saturday morning in Cape Town. And I was very upset, and we're in a hotel. Dr. Elijah Masonye was there, Bishop Alma was there, a whole host of other people were there. So I went to Elijah's room, at 1 o'clock in the morning. Dr. Elijah said, hey, Musupi is not answering my call. And I don't know what's happening, but I have to go through my speech. I can't speak without him validating the syntax and, and the theology around what I'm going to speak about. And in the morning when I woke up, I still called him, didn't answer the phone. His phone actually was off. And as I was about to speak, I went to the room. Elijah prayed for me. As I was about to speak, there is a lady calls me and said, hey, you need to call home. And I call home, and my wife is weeping. And I said, what's wrong? I thought my father had passed away. She says, no, Musupi died. I said, which Musupi? He said, Nicholas Musupi. So he had left a note when he died that should he die, I should organize everything for him. And I organized this funeral. So I roped in my brother and brought him, had 20 buses. On the day he died, my first bus was operating at the airport, and I was not there. Wow. And I understood that business, so I asked my brother to run it, and we ran the business. And when we ran the business, it grew by leaps and bounds. God was opening doors. But again, I would say pride goes before the fall. Instead of coming to the house of God and giving him the praise, I started to take the credit for myself. And what happened is that Sbusiso, who at the time was literally 4 years old, when I came back, as a pittance, as a sign of repenting to my brother, I say, I will take him and raise him as my own. So I took Sbusiso, brought him up, and at the age of 17, he said, Dad, I want to go to university. I said, you choose. what do you want to study? He said, I want to study food technology. I tell my kids, I said, at a certain age, you need to be independent. Okay? So I'm going to make sure that I provide all the resources for you to get there. At the age of 17, he went to Pretoria to study food technology. He wanted to have his own place. I said, stay with Dumisani, who works for Ford Motor Company, and then after 6 months, we can see. So 5 months later, I said, Dad, I found a place. Where's the place? In Pretoria. Me and my friends will club together and we'll live together. I said, cool. That's a deal. Well, he finished writing. After 6 months, he didn't come home. Sunday, I go to church. I switch my phone off. I buy newspapers. I open my phone at 4 o'clock. When I opened my phone that day, I had more than 20 messages from Dumisani and everybody else. They'd found Spusiso, and Spusiso was in hospital, in an ICU. So my brother, I went and collected my brother, and we drove to Pretoria. And there we were. There was actually a strike, and then the hospital was manned by the army. And after 20 minutes of searching, man, we get to this place, and there's Spusiso, 18 years old, fighting for his life, in a coma, in ICU. Okay? And we came to find out that actually somebody pushed him on Friday from the 6th floor. And he fell and he broke his leg and his head followed. And he was still coherent because he gave the paramedics 9 digits instead of 10. And the last one was wrong. So they took him to the hospital. There's no neurosurgeon that deals with the brain that I never spoken to. And tried to research on the functioning of the brain. And only to discover that Spusiso's brain was practically, for all intents and purposes, it was brain dead. So it took us a week to come to terms with that. And remember now, I was drinking alcohol, I was mponing, kokereking, I was sitting in the front pew of the church, I was a master pretender. I was empty inside. I should have been given a best performing award for best performance. And so I had no verse, no chorus to carry me through those dark days. And there I was in the hospital with my son sitting there, my wife, prayer warrior, and we had to come to terms with the fact that we have to switch machines off. On June 16, 7:45 in the morning, we went to the hospital, prayed with him, about 10 to 9 in the morning, we switched machines off. And when we switch the machines off, of course, the thing that says TT, it goes up and down. And I stayed with him until 4 o'clock when that thing said T, and he was dead. So I unwrapped his bandages with my brother to see the extent of his injuries. We shouldn't have done that because the sight was etched in my head and in my mind. And his biological father, my brother, then started to get sick. And, I remember I went to pick him up one day. He says to me, Dia, because he called me Dia. He said, Dia, angifuna ukuboda miyathi. I said, why ukhuluma ngokuboda manje? And it was literally after 2 months we buried Spusiso that I only discovered later that actually my brother was diagnosed with HIV. And unfortunately, my brother could not cope. The stress, the worry, the anxiety took a toll on him. And I was going to Cape Town, and I went to pick him up, to take him to the hospital. He said, "Mfowethu mana ngifuna ukubhoda." Ngithi angihamba sikhulu ngiyabuya. Mangibuya soringa grand uzabe umnandi. Namajita azakuseta. In terms of doctors and all that. Don't worry. I'm here, pay all the bills for you. Don't worry, you're my blood. So when I came back from Cape Town, my sister called me and said, "Hey, you got to come to the hospital." I went to the hospital. As I go to the hospital, they rush him to ICU. He couldn't see me. He was just looking like this. Went to the ICU. I got home. Something told me that he's going. So I got home. I stayed. I got the call at 2 o'clock in the morning. The hospital called me. So I went straight to the hospital. My brother had passed. But the grace of God. I had the opportunity to sit with him in the ward and say, Chief, khona lento bayibiza ukuthi sinner's prayer. Yabona? Mhlambe masifika ngalo uthola ukuthi vele uJesu khona. Amthathe manje. You lose nothing, yabo?
Yeah.
He said, standards esikhulu, standards.
Wow.
Sho ukuthi zonke izono zami vele uyazicima. Ngida zonke esikhulu. Mawuvume enhlizweni uyazicima.
Wow.
So I prayed with him. And when I prayed with him, fortunately, also my wife on the other end had prayed with him. And he passed away. So I couldn't cope with that. It was too much to bear. And I already had familiarized myself with alcohol. So those 4 or 5 glasses now, they increased, to 10, to 11, 12. Eventually, they were not strong enough, so I needed whiskey. So I dumped whiskey. Johnny Walker Black. Kemitamtamai.
Yeah, the walk.
I used to tell my friends, I said, you got to be careful because the real Johnny Walker is facing this way.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful who you. So I started to take copious amounts of alcohol to numb the pain. I've got 3 other, Chief, I've got 3 other kids, okay, that I'm now officially neglecting because I'm trying to deal with the trauma of Sbusiso and the trauma of Dibu. So alcohol is a way to go. So I start taking alcohol, and after taking alcohol, I'm at the wrong place at the wrong time. I go to a wrong door.
Do you believe the trauma, the unresolved trauma, gave you the leap into drugs? Because a lot of times when people take drugs, they talk about escapism.
Yes.
About numbing the pain.
Yes.
About forgetting your troubles.
Yes.
Do you believe that contributed to you going so heavy into drugs?
No doubt about it.
And what did you say to those who, because as black people, you also write in the book that we don't do counseling. It's not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not our thing.
No.
But what do you say to those who have gone through trauma, whether it's abuse, whether it's death in the family, and they may be leading towards that particular door?
You see, I never believed in sitting in front of a shrink and pouring your heart out. And a shrink normally sits and listens to you, and then questioning. After a while, and that's too grand. I never believed in that, and I never believed that you cry. My father hated crying for me. I learned from my father that you don't cry as a man. Okay? Privately. I write about it in my book, when he was beaten by the young police, and he was coming from a liquor house, and I was with him, and he was drinking with his buddies, and he was beaten almost to a pulp, and I was crying. And when they finished with him, he said, you must wipe those tears, dust yourself. When you get home, you don't tell what we've been through.
Wow.
I was a little girl, a little boy, So, not a girl, a boy, So I went through that trauma, man. That, for me, that trauma pushed me to the edge. Because at numb my pain, I couldn't deal with my brother's death. The fact that maybe I could have done more. Sbusiso, maybe I could. Who wants to bury their child? It should be me lying in that hospital, not him at 19, his future ahead of him, first year university. You never think about death of your child at that stage. And there he was. And every time the words of my brother Sbusiso, I needed something that numbed the pain, and alcohol was it. Not shrinks, not counselors, not psychologists. They wouldn't do nothing for me. So it pushed me to the edge. And when I found drugs, I found a serious companion, better than alcohol. I became a proper junkie. that was in denial. I did coke properly. And coke, crack cocaine took my life. I hate drugs with a passion. I dislike drugs with a passion. And the problem is that we are dabbling with them. We are taking weed as, I talk to a lot of young people, they say weed is an herb. I've got 8 boys that I'm dealing with now. The youngest is 17 years old. He's from Alexander. He tells me, he calls me Sir. He said, Sir, crystal meth in Alex. There are rooms in Alex where they disappear to at the age of 11 for weeks. They just come out to go and steal so they can feed the habit. So I took crack cocaine, and crack cocaine took me. And crack cocaine was a solace in the beginning. It was a comfort, and that comfort, the intensity of, remember I'm taking alcohol, it's no longer giving me that intensity. Now I have to add something. So I take alcohol and I mix it with crack. So double the amafuta I2, yabon? Now, after a while, it no longer does anything for me. Crack doesn't do anything. Alcohol doesn't do anything. I move now to cocaine, to the lines that I want. In the process, I'm still thinking I got it together.
You're in control.
I'm still thinking I'm in control. And now what started as a weekend binge of 300 rands, 400 rands, has escalated to a weekend of 2 grand on Friday, 2 grand on Saturday, 2 grand on Sunday. Monday is all lies. And I've got business partners that I'm working with who are counting on my presence. I remember there was a board meeting. I'm driving on the M1 and I'm thinking, Hillbrook, Melville, great places to smoke, to get crack. And I'm wearing a tie and I'm going to a board meeting. I figured, Pakikari la saitini on the freeway.
Yeah.
Open the window, all windows. So you hear, woo, woo. I phoned my partners, I'm not going to make that meeting. I just had an accident in the freeway.
Yeah.
But our accident is cool. Are you okay? No, I think I'll be okay. I just need to get the cops. But kubegani meeting. I hang up the phone and I say, praise God, I just bought myself more time. And I detoured and went to a crack house and smoked.
You talk about that the cocaine, the crack, the drugs took from you. A lot of times when we get into these things, we think about what it will give us.
Yes.
So the crack cocaine will give us a high.
Yes.
It will give us that euphoric feeling,
yes,
that escapism.
Yes.
Can you talk about what it takes from a relational point of view,
yes,
financial,
yes,
etc.?
Yes. My brother. In rehab, it's a cathartic process. In rehab, they make you write by hand what you have used, the amount of money and places that you have used. And the first year, I won't lie, it was party all the way. I don't think, and I say it with humility, and I'm a father, I'm a parent, because I want to help somebody out there. I don't think there's a strip joint in Gauteng that I've not been, primarily to go and find drugs. Okay? I don't think there's a club in Gauteng that I've not been, primarily to go and find drugs. Okay? And I'm talking about top clubs. Okay? And for me, it's a club within a club. Okay? And I hit that stuff strong. And the first year, it's party all the way. You got friends coming out of the woodworks. You got, if you're in Senton, if you're in Fourways, if you're in Randburg, you use proper drugs. It's coke. Top-notch stuff. Okay? Crack, top-notch stuff. Okay? But if you go down, obviously the dealers know their market. So the stuff they make is no longer top-notch stuff. It's diluted stuff. But it's lethal stuff. Okay? I discovered that dealers, they see you as a business case. My dealers, who I spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions on drugs, they never touch the stuff. And I never understood. It was actually 2 dealers that I had that when they saw that I was really deteriorating, they came to me and say, Chief, we think you should check yourself into a rehab center. And I thought they cared. When I shared that story in rehab, they said, no, they're business people. They see that their business is deteriorating. So you need to go pick yourself up,
so you can
come back so you can be productive member of society so they can continue to take from you.
Wow.
The dealers, they never touch the stuff. I had a dealer who attended church. And 2 o'clock in the morning, my drugs finished. And I was looking for him. And I was frantic. I went to his house. Gates were locked. I used my bakkie. I rammed the gate. He was not there. Phoned him. And he was in Benoni in church. And he said, no, come to Benoni. I said, you're in church, man. I'm here. He said, come to Benoni in church. So I come. I park my car right outside the front door. He comes out of church. He gives me my drugs. I give him his money. I leave. But then man, reverse me time. Just on doing this.
The drug dealer is in
Gandumchita is in there dealing with drugs. So what it took, the first year, bless. The first year, and I talk about it, my book tells it all. The women. I'm not proud about it.
Yeah.
I'm really not proud. What it took from me, my relationship with my wife. At the height of my addiction, I was mixing everything. At the height of my addiction, I lied. I became a pathological liar. I don't know how many times I killed my mother just so I can get money from you. Ngithe manu mama mushonile bekaye Durban, bachayise ngemoto. Hey man, angisize me out here. I just need 2 grand ngifake ipetrol. Uyakena musu, uyangena ngisho, uyangiyakena. Tomorrow ngizagaya. Yabona? Durban. No, I'm going to buy drugs. Okay? I don't know accidents that I had. I don't know the stuff that I did. My son at the time was asthmatic. And I was using in my garage, and you become when you use, paranoid. You look at lights, it's like, hey, these are cameras. Yeah? And I'm para, yabon? Futhi my house where it is, ngaphandle kuneyihlahla, yabon? Vule kancane man. Ngiyabona ngathi ihlahla ziyamove, ngathi khona abantu. Yabon? And my TV has a light in front above. When you switch it off, there's a red light. I used to think that it's a camera. It's a khona abantu abangifunayo, so I'll take chewing gum or something like that, ngivale that thing or sellotape ngivale. But even after ngivalile, mase ngibheme kahle. Ngathi le light iyavela futhi, yabo. So now I need to take a blanket and put it over. I stopped using in hotels.
Yeah.
I stopped using in hotels because, can I demonstrate? In hotels, when I use drugs, and ngishaya paranoia grand, bese ngihlala ngiso, angisho umnyango hotel lapha.
Yeah.
Now I'm high. So, lapha imbobo, ngisho lapha umnyango, lapha big. So I'm thinking that underneath confidence, underneath there's people that are looking for me. I lost weight. I became emaciated. I changed. You know, my son was asthmatic. And because I was using in the garage and the smoke was blowing into the house, he came looking for his pump. And instead of giving him his pump, he freaked me out. So I pushed him away. And he got even more sicker and went to the hospital and couldn't even drum up the energy to go see him. That's how bad it was. I lied. I stole toys in the house. A house that I basically furnished myself. I don't have a wedding ring. Neither does my wife, because I traded it for drugs. I built a house in 4 ways. I bought a stand in Dainfen. Sold it. There was a place next to it called Chartwell North Estates. Bought 3.5 hectares of land, cash. Built a house from scratch all the way up. Bought a house in Wendywood. Bought a house in Senton. Bought shares. I smoked all of them. And at some stage, the account, my wife brought me a slip that said 0.00. I became a shadow of my former self. I deteriorated. I caused fights between my family. Our family is tight. And I caused fights between them. I caused fights between my siblings and my wife. My mother at the time, domestic worker, retired. By the way, when I got my job at Wendy's, equivalent to McDonald's, in America, I was working with Mexicans flipping beggars. And this guy shows up, you know, Level M, and a guy named Venon Molefe, Tivo Touch's uncle, in a limousine, you know. And they just released an album in the US. And they showed up, kudos to them, more power to them. And I'm working at Wendy's. And Venon slipped a $100 bill. Said, hey, Chief, sharp. Used to drive a cab, you know. And after 6 months at Wendy's, I phoned my mother. I said, you can quit that job. Yasemakishi. I'll double your pay. And faithfully so, every month. But when I got sick, I saw my mother deteriorate to levels that were shocking. And she came to my house. She never confronted me about nothing. She was a prayerful woman. And she sang a song. I'll never forget the song. It says, Aisali umpihlela
Oh.
She came to my house. Her face was wrinkled. She was old. And here I was, a favorite son who was on dope. I was thin. Stuff were gone in the house. Fights everywhere. Kids, clothes, kids, school fees. I became a friend of the sheriff because there were summonses left, right, and center, taking this, taking that. And, my mother. I decided I'm going to get my life together.
At that point, I believe it's when the late Brahu, who you also mentioned as one of your mentors,
Yes.
and Level M,
Yes.
they came to your house.
Yes. I have tremendous respect for the late Brahu. You know, when I was at Oasis in Davidson, I said to Brahu, I've got these young musicians. I think you can mentor them. You know, why don't you come to church? He says, I'll come to church on condition you help me with MAPSA. He ran an organization called MAPSA. So through MAPSA, I got an opportunity to meet Sepotsula the late. I got to meet, Chico Tola I knew, Kabelo I knew, Mabalane from TKZ. You know, we did a revival at Rhema Bible Church. And to bring young people to Christ, we decided to bring TKZ. you know. You know, remember this song? So we brought them, we said, okay, we give you 5 minutes, and we preached the gospel. And we had a harvest of souls of young people, you know. And I met Kabelo then. Very, very rough, you know. And Hugh Masekela, we used to traverse literally the country, you know. On the board, it was the producer of Generations, Mfundi Vundi. Yeah. So got the opportunity to meet Mfundi. And by the way, you know, I've got this production head, because when I came and I went to SABC, I used to mingle with these guys. I said, but these guys, they write movies and write this. And so I went to research, you know. So I said, no, I can write as well. So I wrote a couple of stories. I pitched them at SABC and actually got three production shows, 13-part episodes.
Wow.
And I wrote and I produced and stuff like that. So when Hugh Masekela found out that I was on drugs, I think my wife called him, you know, called Lebo. 4 o'clock in the morning, they walked in at my house, and Bra Hugh said, damn, dude, you look like an alien. Because you see, my head is kind of like nicely structured. You know? And, you know, just imagine me thin.
Yeah.
And with my head, you know, I look like a UFO, you know, a confidence, you know. So bro, he said, damn, dude, you look like a UFO, you know.
Yeah.
And they started to find out how I got onto drugs. And my voice, and I didn't call them. Somebody called them. So how do I hide this shameful look? Natati stepped up, Vaseline. And impahla, they are hanging on me. So it was a sorry sight. I went to my first recovery place, which was Crescent Clinic, and I stayed at Crescent Clinic for 3 weeks. And Brahu came to visit me at Crescent Clinic. I think he was on the board of Crescent Clinic. Now it's a Keso, somewhere in Randbeck. And it was at that clinic. After 2 weeks, he didn't know this. After 2 weeks of being there, my roommate also was struggling with cocaine, you know. So the parents sent him to rehab, but they didn't know that his wife was also using cocaine. So his wife, who was on the outside, was bringing him drugs. So 2 weeks I'm in recovery. Is using drugs.
In rehab.
In rehab. Instead of reporting him, that craving, it hit me. I'm joined. So the balance of the week, I was high and nobody could detect it. Every night we're using. So celebrating my exit, I couldn't wait to go and score for some more drugs. Drugs are a bondage, you know. In fact, that word drug is pharmakia, which means witchcraft.
Wow.
Yeah, and I went to my second rehab here in Kempton Park. And a day later, I relapsed from that. Okay? And you're paying top money. So I got some dividends from a company that I was involved with. Quite a sizable amount. I blew half of it. And the other half, I paid school fees, I paid this and that. And I decided I need to go to rehab because that money was dwindling. So on the day the lights were switched off, I was on my way to South Coast Recovery Center. And I stayed at South Coast for actually 5 months. It was the program. I phoned a guy, told him, hey man, I'm struggling with drugs. He said, and I wanted, you know, I'm using for this long and I want a quick solution. Because I can't have my partners know that I'm using drugs and all that stuff. So I want a quick solution because I can say, no, you know, I've gone overseas for something and then I come back. You know, so I phoned Mark. Mark says, what are you struggling with? I say, crack cocaine. Hey, he used the Crack cocaine is a bitch. You need more than 3 months. You need 7 months. I said, 7 months. Yeah. So I hung up the phone. I went on a bench. After getting the bench, now I'm feeling guilty. Eventually I paid for 2 months. I went down. I actually went. I'm going to sow a seed for my recovery. So ngaguqe office lakhe because esontweni bese ngisabuya because people were talking about me, about Puzamati, about. I used to have a friend who worked at the mortuary. Yabona, khuluma namajita ukuthi hayi Mariri, ifridge mad. No room for yena la fridge, yabona. And I became a talk of the town, chief. I became a shadow of my former self, you know. And after I finished that, I decided. I said to my Ungumfundisi, yazin, mina mhlambe angikhona ukuthandaza. You know, there was one time I was using drugs, you know, and something said to me, "You're gonna quit. I'm going to stop. I'm going to." And I said, the only way to stop is to pray. So I would kneel in my living room on the couch because everybody was asleep. Kneel on my living room in the couch, but I'm high. But that conscience, you tandaza icon, and in tandaza angfuna ma drugs wama disappear. Yabo? Petty pipe ngapa, petty crack ngapa, ngithi baba ngifuna ukuyeka. Yabo? So a thought struck me. Ukuthi no man, thatha lezinto uyozilahla to another province. Yabo? Now I live in the East Rand, not far from Carnival City. So now I'm driving ngangena ku freeway in the afternoon ngabo 2. Ngathi N12, ngandlula Witbank. Hey, mangithi Middleburg, mangiqeda ukundlula. Khona isport nyana nje isiganga la, yabo? Ngaphaka iside ngathatha lama drugs ngawalahla, ngathi demon, you are no longer part of me in the name of Jesus. Ngangena emotweni, ngashama chorus, I'm coming back. Wangithatha lana, motivated. Quote my scriptures school. Yabona mase. Yabona. Nginamandla school. I'm fired up, you know. Jesu phila kimi. Yabona. So ngiyabuya, amangibuya ngihlala endlini. Mangihlala endlini. Hey. Ayingihleli bukele TBN and all that. I'm sitting, we are eating. Manje man, yabona la ngihleli khona strategically. Mangibheka ngaphansi, I see something that looks like my drug of choice, which is crack cocaine. Nine. Hey, ngicheck coast. Ite mabathi ngithathe lento ngifolde masinya ngiyoyichafa. Yabona? Mangiyichafa manje I smoke a crack pipe. So the pipe is a glass. So inokuphuka. And my puga, you become even more hungry for drugs. So being plug ama pipe ahlukile different places, yabo. So manje ngitholele piece nyana, yabo. Bahambe bayolala. Mabahamba bayolala ngilandele piece. Ngithathe ngishaye le piece. Mangithi ngiyashaya. It's not the drug, it's actually popcorn. It's a piece of popcorn that fell, and I thought it was a drug. Manje, there's no point of return, man. Now I want to smoke. I phone my dealer. My dealer is not available. I phone another dealer. The dealer is not available. Phone another dealer. The dealer is not available. And abo 10:30, 11:15. Hey, think abo 11:15, 12:45. Hey, ngicabanga man, kude man. Nine stash.
COVID bank.
A Middleburg. From Pinonia.
Yes.
This is bondage. This is when you and I know we laugh, but when you deal with drugs, you're dealing with bondage. You're dealing with bound by chains. And I got in my car, I drove all the way. 1 o'clock, 1:45, I parked my car on the side, Chrysler, 300C, bright lights on the freeway. There I am, crawling on the floor, looking for my pipe and for my crack. When I found it, praise God, I found it. There I was getting in the car and I'm smoking. Now coming back, I'm paranoid as hell because all lights are police. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock. I park on the side, I smoke. I'm paranoid, I smoke. I'm paranoid, I smoke. I call this dealer. I call this dealer. He says to me, no man, I've got good stuff for you. You know, just bring 1.5. I'm being nigga 1.5 after tabalaza. You know, I stole. I will steal your phone and look harder than you. It's impossible to Abner Mariri phone. Marangi chonchi the school. And in school it's a full moon. It's a full moon school. Ay mangbuya le dealer angitholi nginike i1.5 nginika ama drugs mangithi ngiyabhema ngathi amakhandlela yabona ngita le enjoyla kabi yabona mangifonela ithi idinga another 1.5 yabona. So now he's going to give me the real stuff, but he gave me, and you can't replace, you can't say no, this stuff is not working.
Yeah, it's not non-refundable.
Non-refundable,
yeah.
You must get. So now ngapa slam angisho asihlangani one-on-one. Uphaka ubhekele nami ngiphaka ngibhekele sivula amafestero ungikhoyela into yami nami ngimkhoyela into yakhe. So ngahlanganisa ama 10 rand abhaya. Yabona?
Yeah.
About 150 ngawafaka ku envelope. So wangikhoyela lento yami nami ngamkhoyela lento yakhe ngavala ifone. And it was top-notch stuff. Ngapema. This is the first time I collapsed in my house. And my wife called an ambulance. And mang papa ma, wow, ngiti manje ngiyaphi, yabona? Mangithi I know. I wanted to go back and smoke some more. So I told the ambulance it's my constitutional right. Can't take me against my will. Take me back home. Buyele ekhaya. Mangifika lapha, I smoked and I collapsed again. I was suicidal. I checked into the Grand Airport. Now it's a Holiday Inn. Bought stuff, took Johnny Walker, put a suicide note with the view of ending it all. I didn't die. I didn't even know that I wrote a suicide note. By the way, for me, as a drug addict, subjectively is suicide for me was not something that was a taboo. It was like an escalation to another level of my using. So it became attractive to take my life.
And it's something that you mentioned in the book that a lot of people who don't find the strength to get out, that's where they
end up. They said the best thing to do is to overdose and move. And you don't say to yourself, you're going to overdose. Because remember, drug addicts don't eat. They don't eat. Bafuna mas snacks nyana nje. Because lento, and that's why I'm dealing with Nyaupe boys. They call them Nyaupe boys, but I call them recovery warriors. They're smart, they're intelligent, they're witty. They've got amaqhinga uktabalaza. It's just umtabalaza was on the wrong path. So we just need to bring them. And when you take Nyaupe, it's basically rat poison, strychnine, mixed with heroin, and mixed with dacha. So you take that combination, when you smoke it, my phela intsango emzimbeni kuphuma ne heroin kusala I red poison and iyakudla esiswini. So you want to smoke more. So that's why my two guys, they tell me straight, they come to my session, but ntomdala sibhema ekseni asabhemi manje sibhema ekseni sibhema amasiyolala emini simnandi. Yabona? But I need to get them to a level where they don't smoke. Because when they smoke, when they come to my session, you can say hello now. He can answer you 6 minutes later. Madam konde niseka kuphendulile uthe hello back to you. Mara lo hello udelay. Everything is slow motion. And I write in I've got a workbook. I put out the workbook. When I came back, it's called Choose Life. No funny stories about drugs, no funny stories about alcohol. And on page 18, I give you all the drugs, how they are taken, the high they give you, the timing they last in your body, the low, the brain effect, and the body effect. So you have to make a choice. So all the way from cannabis, ganja, weed, doobie, to methamphetamine, and all the way to nyaupe, wunga. When you go to KZN, there's a place called Wunga Park. Everybody in Wunga Park is using. When you go to Pulusong, there's actually a place there called Ward 2B. I've got some boys in Geleksta. They say, hey, Krotman, lape Ward 2B. Hey, any Ward 2B are too, sir. You go into Ward 2B, most of the people are chained to their beds. And they are young people, 19 years old. Their mind fried, cooked. And some are singing, some are conducting choirs that don't exist. Some are dancing, and majority of them are on Kimbi. They are wearing diapers. 21 years old.
All that potential gone.
This is a pandemic, and this is no joke. Anybody who's dabbling, who's taking drugs, if they can stop now, it will be a blessing, because there's no way of escape. You can lie and lie and lie. The only person you're lying to is yourself, because you're going to steal, you're going to stash in the wardrobe. I used to stash them in my children's clothes. My daughter went to a private school here in Benoni, and because I was paranoid, I thought nobody will look for drugs in her blazers. So I put drugs in her blazers, but of course I forget. And she wears a blazer, she goes to school. Magafike class in what is this? Magati, Gua, what her father is addicted to. Can you imagine the damage, the mental damage and the disfiguring that it does to them? Oh. So I had work to do when I came back from rehab. I had to close all the doors that I'd opened to come in. I had to break the spirit. I never believed in deliverance. I never believed in counseling. I believe in counseling like you would not believe. Remember I told you I didn't believe in shrinks? I spent 8 months in rehab. After 5 months I'm spending, the counselors are sitting and they said, Mariri, there's the door. You're ready to go. You can go. But we believe as counselors, collectively, that you're not done with your recovery. And there was another guy there who was with me. So I decided, I said, how long am I staying? They said, we don't know. And I'm paying 19, 20 grand a month. Okay? Money that I don't have. And I decided against all odds. I phoned home. I said, I don't want to hear nothing about home. I phoned my wife. And remember, the relationship with my wife was rocky. With my children, they came to rehab. They went through counseling. I didn't realize the extent of the damage that I'd done to them. Only until I went to rehab. My marriage was hanging on a thread. I'm sitting here as an example that prayer works. And my wife prayed me out of that mess, literally. And I'm amazed at the fact that she's still with me. I'm not perfect, but I want to be perfect for her. Wow. The balance of my wife, that's what I am. And my children, of course, and my children.
So we're gonna take a couple of questions from the audience and then from online as well. Do you have a roving mic? So if you're online and you've got some questions for Ntate Mariri, please feel free.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Ntate Mariri. My name is Tsepo. My question is, I once heard you speak at UJ. You once came to our school to speak. So you once mentioned how much the course cost for you to go for recovery. How can we make it accessible for people in the township? Because there's people who are eager to recover, but they always relapse, like you're saying, more especially with things like nyaupe and so on. how can we make it accessible to those people? And also, my last question is, with your business partners, how did you regain the strength to get back to business like you are now? Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Maybe
yeah,
I should
tackle it. Yeah,
very quickly. I'll tackle it. I'm in the space of recovery. I found my ministry, and my ministry is in active addiction. Is with addicts. I love addicts. I love kids who are addicted to drugs. I want to get them off. I know the trajectory and the route. I partnered with an organization called Project Exodus, and I was telling Professor, basically it's an outpatient program that basically helps churches and organizations and para-organizations to have their own recovery program, recovery plan to reach to young people. I work closely with social development, and they've got a number of rehabs. So I keep my recovery by giving it away. Okay? So I pick kids, put them in the van, talk to some of the directors, social development, to say, please talk to social workers, and off we go, and I leave them there. And hopefully they recover. Of course, I can't do for everyone. You know, with the limited resources that I have, that's what I do. Of course, we've got a bigger vision in terms of a turnkey solution, because I believe that we have an opportunity to take the recovery champions, or the Nyaupe boys as they call them, who, the problem with recovery is that you have to go back to the same community, okay? And I had the strength after coming out of South Coast to confront my friends that were alcoholics or using alcohol and taking drugs. And I had to draw the line in the sand. And I called them, I said, you guys don't know that I was an addict, but today I draw the line in the sand. As of today, my recovery comes first. You are no longer my friends if you are using. Good luck, God bless you, I wish you well. Okay? Out of 8 people, maybe 5 of them says, no, we are also drawing the line in the sand. We are not going to use anymore. In fact, one is a medical doctor now, a practicing medical doctor, or 2 are pastors, but effectively we had to draw the line in the sand that we can't go back to that lifestyle. Okay? So with my business partners, I had to get back to them and tell them the truth. And the truth was very painful, and the truth obviously will come with consequences which I was willing to bear. Okay? I had to go to all the people that I owed money. I was on credit bureau, so I had to, if I owed Professor Morris 5,000, I had to go to him and said, with what I have, I can only afford 200 rands a month to pay you. Of course, he will be angry and stuff like that. I said, that's what I can afford. Okay? Otherwise, if you sue me, I've got nothing to give you. So 200 rands, I pay him. It took me almost 7 years to finish the debts that I had, that I'd accumulated to pay people. And that's the cost of that. So with my business partners, I had to sit them down to say, this is where I've been, this is where I've done. And I had to do that before I went to recovery, to the recovery center. And of course, they came when time permitted to come and see me and to come and be with me, and understood the nature of my disease.
Thank you. Next question, Dion.
Good evening, my name is Dion. So we come from a township. Basically, yes. Our township nowadays, it's all about the life of Monday to Friday, it's work. Friday to Sunday, it's bumnandi. You know, so it's kind of how we portray life now, that that's the life. I only live once, I should enjoy myself while I'm young. But we're forgetting the point of time is going at the same time, you know. So I can wake up now between the age of 18 to 25, I feel like I just want to enjoy my life. And then later on, I have nothing. So in terms of us young people, what would you say to us to motivate us on that perspective of ubumnand, I have to enjoy my life. I'm still young. And what can you say to us that it's time maybe for us to overcome that, and how do we do that? How do you overcome that? Thank you.
Well, as a young person, you can enjoy your life in a clean way. You don't have to be decadent or to live a chaotic and destructive life. You know, I was young once, we were young once, And we enjoyed music, we enjoyed parties, but you have to be careful with the trajectory. Drug addicts or drug pushers and drug dealers are forever looking to expand their business. Okay? I was at a school in Benoni a couple of weeks ago. Okay? I've gone to speak there on drugs, and I pull no punches when I speak about it to young people, especially at high school level. And as I arrived, the kids are in assembly. And police had to be called in because there are kids who were selling drugs in assembly, at assembly. You know? And when they discovered, they pulled them out and said, no, they need to get. I said, no, this is the reason I'm here, for these kind of guys. So let them listen, let them wait, you know. So obviously had to engage them and things like that. So in as much as you have fun, you have to be careful what kind of fun that you have. And if we come from townships, and Professor Morris will tell you, my learned friend here will tell you, the places where we come from, that it was not easy. Yes, we were looking for fun, but we were looking to better ourselves. You know, in as much as we were pushing fun, we were pushing education, going to school, graduating, starting a business, and stuff like that. So there was such motivation, and that must come back. Okay? I had a friend at school, not retreat, I went to boarding school, Kololo, BGF, Beggarsford. And go assembly, you know, he was a bully, you know, and he used to say to me, Mariri, you know, and in high school, and true to form, I found him there, I left him there, you know. So you have to take your life into your own hands. And when you understand the community and the family that you come from, you have to say, somebody bled and died in this country to provide the opportunities that you have now. And you have to seize those opportunities against all odds. And sometimes you have to deny yourself. You know, I was flying to Nigeria many moons ago. And I'm flying, I run into this young man. And this young man comes to me and says, Abner, please, bro, Abner, when you come back, give me a call. So come back, he gives me a card, come back, I give him a call. And when I give him a call, he says, please, let's have coffee. I have coffee. He said, no, you came to Kwakwa to come and address us. Tells me his story, grew up in a poor family, and basically at the airport, the place where I was having a coffee at was actually his store and did not have parents. So you have to decide for yourself what kind of future you want for yourself. And with the kind of people that you have, you can leverage on the quality of the black leadership that we have and black executives that we have to say, if Professor Morris has achieved against all odds, maybe I can do better than him. No. And with the opportunities at your disposal, nothing is impossible. You can have fun and a future together.
Wonderful. You may stand up, but I'm going to take a question from online, from Jabulile. It's Busiswe Jembe. She said, after losing everything, what made Mr. Mariri realize he no longer wanted to do the drugs after relapsing a couple of times? What was his enough is enough?
Rock bottom.
Rock bottom.
Rock bottom.
Wow.
Rock bottom, my children, my family. You know? And I said to myself, I had nothing. I had nothing. When I say nothing, I had nothing. After having amazing opportunities, and I felt that I was going somewhere, reduced to practically zero.
So rock bottom was where you built?
Yeah, rock bottom was saying, Lord, you know, that airport story I told you about, that God who provided that. There's a preacher that came who looked for me and couldn't find me. And I ran into him at a conference. And when I got, he said, son, where you been? I said, I've been through a storm. He said, let's meet tomorrow for coffee. So we met tomorrow for coffee, preached an amazing sermon. We met for coffee in Senton. And he said, son, after I engaged, asked me about my wife and stuff like that, and my children, how things are. You know, he said something that was profound to me. He says, I'm going to pray a prayer for you at a restaurant. And he says, the enemy can keep everything that he stole from you. I'm praying that God will restore.
Amen.
And he's a God of restoration.
Amen.
And what he restores must be completely new.
Yeah.
You know? So I say to people, if you want to see a miracle, I truly should not be alive today.
Amen.
Had it been not for the grace of our God. So yes, rock bottom.
Rock bottom. Wow. Question?
Sanibonani,
Yebo.
niyaphila. Ngicela ukuthatha nje language yami tata. Angizudi bamde. You said enough is enough. Tata nginalo usizo lwe-drugs. Ngasho ngithi ngokuqala or ngoyesibini emhlabeni ozalikhipha. Usizo le-drugs elikhona noma ubani umuntu obulawa zi-drugs or isigarette, isi-smoke likhona usizo ngenalo. Sizinto ezintathu ngesixhosa kuthiwa ikhala, amakhala amabini. Kunekhala leli elokishini bizwa ukuthi ingcelwane. Lelase lokishini alisizi, lisizi isizo kuphela. Into esibhemayo nesiphuzayo i-affecta amathumbu. I-affecta umqondo. Ma-affecta umqondo, i-affecta limithambo yokuphefumula. Singakwazi ukuphefumula. Ayikho into engancedeki tata. Ayikho. Dithi i-drugs lezi zikhona eSouth Africa zenziwa ngabomu ukuze kubulawe abantwana base-South Africa. Ayisuki la. Ingxaki, I'm sorry. Thina singabantwana bala bamanje asibukeli i-news ngendlela right. I-media is affectile. Sorry to say this. Is affectile because i-SABC lesibukelayo ayikhiphi yonke into ngendlela right. So nginalo usizo tata. Angizolibeka straight because kwathina singabantu siyalidamage. Ngingathanda ukuthi sikhulume sizobona ukuthi singaya kanjani phambili sizokwazi ukunceda isizwe. Amen.
Just if I may comment there, when Professor opened up, he said we need to write new stories and put out new information about who we are, and effectively get more writers. And that's why I'm blessed to be part of this forum today. And hopefully, if there are classes, I would like to participate in those classes as well. And because we need to start to change the narrative on television. And how do we do that? By producing our own people who produce quality work that can then be presented to change the narratives.
Yes,
okay? Alternatives to Moja Love and the information that they disseminate. But yeah, it's a conversation for another day. Yeah.
All right. I think if we were to take too many more questions, we'll be until the sun would rise.
Yes.
So we've got two more, and then we're going to close.
Yes.
Question from Lebo online. How is the trust now between you and your family, and do you trust that you will not relapse?
I live one day at a time. One day at a time. I pray in the morning when I get up. Before I switch TV, before I touch my phone, I pray. I take Holy Communion. Okay? I pray that God will keep me safe. When the sun sets and I go home, I'm with my family. When they go to sleep, I call on the name of the Lord and say thank you. I'm not unique. I know a lot of people who relapsed and gone back, and their life became even chaotic, more chaotic. And the trust levels, when I came from rehab, what I said meant nothing. So I had to put myself into a regime that tests me. So I gave my wife the right to say, pee in a cup, I want to test you. For 2 years, I would get an allowance. And that allowance, if I use that money, I would have to bring receipt so that it balances.
Account for it.
Yeah, those are systems that I put in place for myself. I attended meetings twice a week for 3 hours at a time so that I can consolidate my recovery. It was only after 4 years of clean time that I felt that I was strong enough to go to people. And those that I drank with, those that I smoked with, I had to completely discard and tell them in their face that you are no longer my friends. God will give me new friends. I didn't say to them, God will give me new friends. It was a painful process to tell somebody you grew up with that, Chief, now no further. But my recovery was important, my children were important, and my wife was important. The trust levels, I had to earn them. I remember 3 years into my recovery, when you use crack cocaine, you find gauze. You know, this filter thing is called gauze. And I come home one time, everybody's upset, and I said, what have I done now? Only to find that in one of the places that I used to use in the house, that gauze fell, and they found it, and their countenance changed. And when they changed, and there I was, couldn't defend myself. The only thing I could defend myself on was that there was a test in the house. I said, you can test me, and you can call my sponsor. So they tested me, and when they discovered, now here's what was painful for me, painful. I remember I'm a priest of my home, I'm a father. And when they tested me and discovered that I was negative, no apology, no congratulations. It was like business as usual. Okay? And I phoned my sponsor, very angry, to say, perhaps my marriage has run its course. And he said, okay, let's meet. So we had coffee. He said, remember how many times you lied to them. You've given them those set of experience. Yeah. So even when you come after 8 months with the chuzbah that you've achieved, they still don't trust it. You give them new sets of experiences. Yeah. Wow. You don't tell them what to do. Fit into their schedule. So I fitted in their schedule. I remember my son had a thing at school, and I was sitting in the audience, and while I was sitting in the audience, I could feel a heavy presence behind me. When I looked back, it was my dealer that I hadn't seen for almost 4 years. And I got this anger, this wanting to use. And when my son finished, I walked straight opposite where I was sitting, walked in, and there he was next to my car. And he says, Chief, where you been? I've got something new for you. I want you to taste it. And I pushed him, got in my car, and left, went home. And when I got home, I never phoned my sponsor for 2 weeks. I was romanticizing the idea of saying, now for 4 years I'm clean if I just do one time. But the rehab that I went to, they teach you to play the movie through. So craving is like a coming attraction of a movie that's coming. So when you go to the movies, they play trailers of movies that are coming. The movie could be a 2-hour flop, but the trailer is always exciting.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's attracting you to come and watch it. So craving is like a coming attraction. And when you play the entire movie through, and that entire movie through is that, okay, if I take that hit, if I get into that, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose it all. I'm going to lie again. I'm going to have accidents again. By the time you finish with a list, that desire is no longer there.
Yeah. Wow.
So I always play a movie through. By the way, I have these using dreams. Sometimes I will dream like I'm using and I'm sweating, and when I wake up, I'm actually physically sweating. That's why I believe in the power of prayer. And there's a scripture that says, for the thief cometh but to kill, steal, and destroy, yep. But I've come that you might have life. The thief is somebody with a neurotic impulse to steal. And that's what the enemy has. He has no other disposition but to steal from you. And what does he want to steal? He not only wants to steal from you your joy, your peace, your future, your plans, your goals. What he wants to do, he wants to also kill you. So he steals from you. When he finishes stealing from you, you then steal from other people. You steal from your parents, you steal your parents' joy. I know parents who are fighting. I sat with a father in Springs, and this father, the mother called me because he's got 2 boys that are using. And the father is sitting strategically at the corner like that, watching everything. And after he spoke, he says, wena ngiyakwazi, ngikwazele Themba. Uthi ufuna ukwenzani ngalezi nja lezi? Lezi nja kudala zingikhathaza. Mina kahle kahle ngifuna ukuzibulala ngazi ukuthi zile emathuneni. Referring to his boys who are in his presence. Can you imagine the power of words and to what extent that parent has suffered to come to that resolution where he speaks to his kids like that? You know, he says, you are wasting your time. I don't want to be here. Now the mother and the father are fighting. They eventually got a divorce. And he's moved. Not because they didn't love each other, but because of the manipulative processes that the kids have engaged in to divide the parents and to continue to rampage. I hate drugs with you don't understand. When I say, when some of you guys who dabble with weed, and I know you are in here, you have tried weed. You have been put under pressure by your friends to try weed. You're watching me, and you've tried weed. I say to you, it's time to stop. Because weed is not an herb. It's a doorway to other drugs and another world that will rambunctiously destroy your life at the very seams of what you're trying to do. So quit now. Stop now. Get help now. Talk to somebody. Your future is too bright. Your destiny is too bright for you to dabble in. I see you in America. I see you in the UK. I see you in London. Your peers, your friends are everywhere abroad. And that's what you need to embrace your future. And how do you do it? By saying no to drugs, by saying no to cocaine, by saying no to crack, to weed, by saying no to alcohol. I know the temporary pleasure that it brings to you because you want to be sexually active, you want to be cool, there's nothing cool about it. I sat with a kid in rehab at South Coast who was 21 years old. Brilliant mind. I found her in rehab. I left her in rehab. She's basically sentenced to a life of medication, that child. That child basically, she will sit with you, she will talk sense, she will be amazing. But at 1 minute, she's there all by herself, conducting choirs, navigating traffic that does not exist. And her mind is gone. Basically, you are one path away from losing your mind. That weed can give you psychosis. It's not an herb. And people react differently to different drugs. When you think you're cool, you're taking drugs. After 2 months, you take drugs. Next thing you know, not a nice environment. Not a nice thing. And your future is basically gone and forgotten. So, bagbize nyawupe boys, baglabule, bagshayela into ongazenzanga. Bathi utshontshile ungatshontshanga. Because iyakufanela, because bathi nyawupe boys,
that's what they do.
That's what they do. So
as we close, Mtate Mariri,
yes,
there's a poem that you cited,
yes,
in the book.
Yes.
My name is cocaine.
My name is cocaine.
Can we please close?
Yes.
With that poem.
With that poem. My name is cocaine. Call me Coke for short. I entered this country without a passport. Ever since then, I've made lots of scum rich. Some have been murdered and found in a ditch. I'm more valued than diamonds, more treasured than gold. Use me just one time and you too will be sold. I'll make a schoolboy forget his books. I'll make a beauty queen forget her looks. I'll take a renowned speaker and make him a bore. I'll take your mother and make her a whore. Once I take charge, you won't have a prayer. I'll make a school teacher not forget how to teach. I'll make a preacher not want to preach. I'll take your rent money and you'll get evicted. I'll murder your babies or they'll be born addicted. I'll make you rob, steal, and kill. When you're under my power, you have no will. Remember, my friend, my name is Big C. If you try me one time, you may never be free. I've destroyed actors, politicians, and many a hero. I've decreased bank accounts from millions to zero. I make shooting and stabbing a common affair. Once I take charge, you won't have a prayer. Now that you know me, what will you do? You'll have to decide. It's all up to you. The day you agree to sit in my saddle, the decision is one that no one can straddle. Listen to me and listen to me well. when you ride with cocaine, when you ride with methamphetamine, when you ride with weed, when you ride with alcohol, when you ride with whatever, you are headed for hell.
While you're standing like that, Baba, you have to pray now. Yes. You have to. We normally don't do this at ULP because we respect everybody's. But I think you need to stand up, and this man needs to pray for you. You may be here, and God has been speaking to you through this man. And he needs to pray a prayer of deliverance. I don't want to expose you. I don't want you to say, raise your hand. But you need this man, the anointing that has been laid upon his life. And this ministry, I recognize it now. Bob, raise up your hand.
Father, we thank you for yet another privilege and another opportunity. We recognize this moment that without you we're nothing. And tonight we just want to give you all the praise and all the glory and all the honor and all the dominion. We say it all belongs to you. Thank you for this moment that we could meet in this fashion. That, Father, this is a defining moment that will redefine our lives. And therefore, Father, I commit these young people into your capable hand, a hand that reaches out, a hand that forgives, a hand that cleanses, and a hand that restores. I declare in the name of Jesus,
amen,
that from the top of their heads to the soles of their feet, that no weapon formed against them will prosper. I put a wall of fire in the name of Jesus Christ, that none will die prematurely.
Yes.
That, Father, they will live to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I pray a rejuvenation of spirit, a revival of the soul, for them, my God, to take their future into their own hands. And I say to Satan, Satan, you have no control over their lives. That they are free, and they are free indeed. And Father, we commit them into your capable hand. We commit them, Father, under your leadership and under your anointing. I pray that you superintend and supervise their affairs. In the name of Jesus Christ, we come against the spirit of premature death. In the name of Jesus Christ, we declare it so. In Jesus' name. Somebody say amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless you, my brother.